Okay, so I have got all of the siding on the building, front, back, everywhere, so it's about time to paint it. I did paint the inside, and I just painted it color called stone gray. So the inside's all painted, but I decided I'm going to paint the outside this Rust-Oleum camouflage color. So this is probably pretty familiar to everybody. You can pick it up pretty much anywhere, Ace Hardware, Home Depot, Lowe's, any place like that. So that's what I'm going to paint it. So you can see I got a little sloppy with the glue, but that's okay. I knew it would be kind of sloppy. That two-part epoxy isn't the neatest stuff, but for what I was wanting to do, it's going to hold forever basically, and it's not going to matter since I'm painting it. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and spray it, and then while it is drying we're going to work on the floor of the plywood plant a little bit. So here's the floor of my cement plant. What I've done is I've marked it every 2.5 inches, which is roughly 10 feet in HO scale. And I'm going to score it at that point. So I've got a little scoring tip for my X-Acto knife, and I will just take my ruler, hold it against the edge, and then score it with that. And that should put expansion joints in the concrete floor. And then what I'm going to do is take some primer. First, I've got some gray primer, and I'm going to prime the whole thing after I score it. And then we're going to come back with some of this paint that I picked up at Hobby Lobby. This is lightly textured acrylic paint, so that'll give me a little bit of texture on the floor, just so it's not plain. I got a couple colors. I got fresh granite and cool concrete. And you can kind of see the top what those colors are, and that's what color I'm going to put as the base coat after the priming. I decided to prime it first because it would take a lot of this stuff to cover, and I don't want to waste this paint since it's a little expensive. I see it's $3.19 a bottle. It's not as expensive as Vallejo, but it is a little more expensive than just the regular stuff they sell there. So that's why I'm going to prime it first, come back with this, and then after that, of course, we'll weather it and everything. But let me do the scoring and putting the primer on it, and then we'll come back. Alright, just so you can see the scoring process, I just left the last two. I just put my ruler on there, use the little scoring point, just drag it on there, just like that, pretty easy. Alright, so now once my scoring's all done in my concrete, so basically I've got 10-foot sections of concrete and expansion joints every 10 feet. So I think that should be good for an industrial floor. Alright, so now, like I said, I'm going to go ahead and lay the primer down, and once the primer's dry, we'll come back with putting the textured paint on. Alright, so now that the primer is dry, I'm going to go ahead and start putting on my texture paint. So what I figured I'd do, it's going to take about 2 bottles to cover this entire thing. So what I'm going to do is actually mix these two colors together. So I'm mixing together, it's called fresh granite, and the other one is called cool concrete. So I think it'll look good really mixed together. And I'm going to try, what I'm going to try to do in the beginning, and I'm going to see if this works, is I'm not going to mix the colors real well. I'm just going to let them mix as I'm brushing them. and see what kind of effect that gives. I got most of the paint out there. So this paint is relatively thick. I might add a little thinner to it to get it to where it brushes a little bit better, more smoothly. I have my acrylic thinner that I mixed up here. I'm just going to put a little bit in, not much. So I'm going to take my brush and dip it in here. And see what happens. Put it on the front here. It's kind of hard to get down in this little cutout corner. You'll notice I have taken the track off, and I just thought that would be better than trying to mask it. Now I'm going to give it, just try to brush it as straight as possible. And this, of course, isn't going to be the final color because I am going to come back and weather it. I'm going to brush right here first, try to get the front of it. So I make sure that that's taken care of. Yeah, it might have been overkill 2 bottles, so I might have should used a half a bottle of each color. And I think I would have used a little more thinner, probably. Let's get some of these brush strokes out, but that's okay. This is going to make a nice color once it's weathered and everything. A good concrete color, I think. I'm just trying to brush as straight as possible. And when it says it's finely textured, it means finely textured, because you can't really tell just by looking at it that there's any texture to it. I think we'll call that done for right now. and just leave it like that. I don't think it's going to need another coat, but we are going to come back and do some washes over it to give it a good dirty concrete feel. So we'll see you back after this dries. Okay, so this is finally dry, and I think it dried at just about the perfect color, exactly what I wanted it to be. So, which was good. And don't let it fool you. It's going to be a lot lighter before it dries. So the next step to do is to weather this concrete. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some washes I've got. I'm going to start with a dark brown wash and see what happens from there. The good thing about washes is you can always start over if you need to. So let's I'm going to use I don't know what I'm going to use to start out with. So sometimes this is just an experiment. I mean, I can watch and see other videos and things like that, but I want to kind of experiment with this, because remember, this, even though it's concrete, it's inside, it's not outside. So, but it does tend, concrete does tend to get brown with age. So let's see what a brown wash does to it. Could be a little dark, maybe, maybe not. You can always come back over it with some thinner if you think it's too dark. And I have my thinner in a bottle here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get my sponge and come back over it with the sponge. I think that'll help. So the sponge just seems to do a good job. Right, that wash is just getting down in the joints, and that's good. I want to make sure it gets down in there. Push it down in with the brush. Alright, now I'm going to come back and once again some more thinner on this little sponge here. Let that wash good and distributed so it doesn't leave, we don't want it to leave puddles. And I'm just going to come back and wipe it. A good soft cloth is good for wiping this. Yeah, there you go. And even in the expansion joints, you don't want this, you don't want them to be so noticeable that they're just really dark black lines. That's just not a, that's not a good look either. Because there has to be a hint that they're there. But that's all you want. All right. Yeah, that's looking like we want it. So now that I've used the dark brown and the black, I'm going to tone it down a little bit and use I'm going to use a wash called European Dust. Let's see what that looks like. And once again, I'm not going to really clean my paintbrush. All I'm going to do is take my paintbrush just like it is. I just wiped it off a little bit. And then I'm gonna, and you can see all I'm doing is I'm just splattering the colors. I want to even this out as much as possible first. Gives us a nice dirty concrete floor feel. Make sure I get my edges, although they probably won't be seen. I'm going to use my wet sponge a little bit and go over it. Like I said, I'm doing the opposite way to the way I painted it because I don't want the wash highlighting any of the brush strokes is why I'm doing that. And you'll notice that I've removed my track. So that was just I knew I would be sloppy and be getting it all over my track if I didn't remove it. Of course, like if your track is glued down, you can actually just cover it with something, some painter's tape or something like that. Okay, so I like that color. And the longer you let it sit, the more pigment you're going to get down into what you're painting. So of course, since it's a wash, it won't take that long to dry. And I think I'm going to leave the front a little bit dirtier. That's down at track level. That's going to get dirtier anyway. I think that'll work better. And it looks like the floor is just about, I think I'm gonna go back and use the dark wash one more time, dark brown. I'm not worried about my backdrop because I'm going to come in. Not only is the building sitting up against it, but I'm going to be painting it. Spread this out a little bit. Yeah, I think I want a little more brown tone in my concrete. And if you go outside and look at your concrete just out in your house or whatever, you'll notice parking lots, the curbs, you'll notice how brown it's gotten in a lot of places. Of course, one thing you do want to do, you don't want a real even color because concrete, it's gray and brown, all kinds of colors like that mixed in. I want to get those multiple colors to kind of come through. There we go. So I'm going to let that sit just a minute, not much longer than a minute. And I don't think I'm going to use my sponge this time because I think I want to leave a little bit more. But I am going to come along with my rag, just a dry rag, and see what happens. Yeah, that left a lot more brown this time. And you can just keep repeating these processes until you're happy with the color. It's getting a dirty look to it, an aged and weathered look. I'm going to come back and do one more of the dark gray wash. It's almost black. It's one I made myself. So it's kind of a charcoal. But I do want to darken this up just a little bit because it's still looking, although the color's about right, it's still looking a little light. Okay, well, my battery died, so right in the middle of doing my washes. So I did finish doing the wash on this concrete pad. So just a couple things to point out. I don't know where I left off. I don't know where the battery died until I go and start putting the video together. So I'll say this again at the risk of repeating it. I used all different colors of washes. I used a black wash. It's really dark gray, but a real dark gray. So because I made it myself, I had run out of the Vallejo wash, so I made my own. I used also oiled earth wash, dark khaki green, European dust, and dark brown. So those are the 5 washes that I used as I was doing this. Now my last wash, what I did is I mixed the black and the dark brown and let it sit about a minute, and then I just wiped it with my cloth. And I think that made about the color I wanted to finish with. So as you can see too, the edges are stained where the wash ran down, and I like that effect because of course you won't see the front and the back, but you will see, you possibly see in here where the track's going to be. You'll possibly see that. So that gives a little, not only dirt, but water seepage up into the slab and things like that, which is a real possibility in Louisiana. You know, water settles and sits down around the bottom of these slabs, so it gets a little darker and of course dirtier down there. So you can see also that the expansion joints were highlighted by the wash, which is exactly the effect I was wanting. I had painted the concrete color this way, so I wiped the wash this way just so as not to highlight those little brush strokes. It did a little bit, but I think that's okay, being that it was a textured paint that I put underneath. I kind of like the effect because it gives the idea of the concrete being laid out. But I think all in all, that's the color I really wanted to go for. And like I said, once you're doing these washes, you want to make sure that you go for the color that you want. And this is the color that I had in my mind. And you just experiment, do over and over. Go from, I started with my dark brown, then I went to the dark gray, then I went to a lighter color. For some of it, I used a wet sponge to wipe off, and for some of it, I just dry wiped it with my cloth here. So you can experiment with those little things to get the effect and the colors that you want. And just remember, underneath this is just some pink foam. This is just 1/2-inch pink foam is all it is. When I cut it, I made sure I sanded it good and smooth. Same on the front here, just sanded and then of course painted. So I might clear coat it with some acrylic clear coat. Of course, you don't really want to use oil-based paints as much as possible on this foam because it will melt it if it seeps into it. So I don't want to risk it with this right here, because then I'd have to tear it up and start all over again. So I'm going to get an acrylic clear coat put on it. I'm also going to probably put a black and yellow stripe along it, just kind of as a warning for the edge of the platform. So this of course is going to get beaten up. It's not going to get quite as brown because it is an interior concrete, so it doesn't get as brown as it does a lot of times when you've got outside that gets more weathered by the rain and things like that. So I left it a little more to the gray than maybe I would have if it was outside concrete. So that's just my preference. So as soon as all this dries, this down in the cracks here, I'm going to set the building back on, and this will end this part. I'm going to come back with the next part of weathering the building and doing the roof.